Committee members and Sarah and Alan who join us and bring their expertise to our table, which when I was reading this, I was like, oh, thank goodness they are. So thank you for joining us today. Our Deputy Mayor, Councillor Wharehinga, will open with Karakia for us.
Thank you very much, Your Worship. Me noi tātou, let us pray. E o ngā mano tēnei te whakamuimea, miti atu ki a koe mo tēnei hui ngā mātou, arahina mai ki au, ki te tika, ki te punu a mātou, tukoa mai tō wairua tapu hei manaki, hei āwhina, hei tiaki hoki a mātou. Anei mātou e tūhu nei mui tuaroaro, ka tuku I tēnei inui, I runga I te ngō tō mātou kai whakaore I Kaiti. Amen.
Amen. Thank you for that. Okay, I don't think we've got any apologies for our committee members. Look at us, A team. Everyone is here today. Ronya's just coming in, so she'll join us in a second. Any declarations of interest in regards to our agenda today? No. You will see that we have a huge agenda in front of us today, but nearly everything we have seen, especially our big front bit. So even though when I opened it, I was like, oh my God, these are 3 days worth of reading. Once we started, I realized it is stuff that we've seen and then that we've workshopped with our team in the back. So I'm going to take you to page 5, and we are going to take a look at our minutes that was sent out relatively early by the lovely Dee. Any questions or queries or factual incorrectness? Moved by Councillor Wharehinga, seconded by Councillor Foster. All in favour? 3 carried. Then we also have our public excluded minutes, which gives nothing away. That's why we can pass it here. Are the same people willing to move those? Okay, all in favour? I love the enthusiasm, Councillor Parata. Okay, let's go to page 14. Paul gave us an update there, which he's written on the 6th of March, just in regards to the work happening there. Because that's on, you will see the due date was the 18th, because this committee was originally the 18th, but we had to juggle stuff around to fit in other obligations as well. Any questions or queries on page 14? That's clear. Okay, then we just have our governance plan. So Joe, I'm going to hand over to you all 200 pages of joy. I first want to take the opportunity and say what a piece of work, far out. It is when you start seeing how things fit together and all the different plans that we've done over time, that it is just fantastic to see how slowly things are coming together. So I also want to say to your team, thank you for also making it easy for us who are not RMA commissioners and don't always do that lingo to understand it and make sense to everyday councillors as well. So I'm going to hand over to you to walk us through, and then there are a few recommendations that we will get to, but without further ado, I'm going to drink my coffee. You're going to talk. Thank you.
Great. And I will invite Shane up to the front, as he is person who's all over the detail of all these 2 papers. So we did workshop a lot of this material. Yes. And some are just, I guess the key thing to note is this material still being updated and changed, both as a result of the workshop and further engagements, both with Tangata Whenua and the community. So just because of the timing of meetings and where we're at in the schedule, we're trying to keep you as up to date as possible while we're still meeting that quite ambitious timeframe of getting something notified before the local body elections mean we have to sort of stop public-facing work for a while. So it's a bit of a balancing act at the moment, and we're at a bit of a crescendo phase in terms of the work programme. So there's been lots happening behind the scenes, and now it's all reaching a point. So over to Shane.
Joe. I'll take the paper as read, although there is one change that I'd like to make in terms of the next step. The intention when the paper was written was that the draft plan change would go to the council for a decision to send to iwi on the 27th of March. That agenda has got really quite large, and now the intention is to take it on the 9th of April, which is
The second council meeting.
Second council meeting.
One that I just alluded everyone to, just when you weren't here, I said to, just remember our council agenda has been broken in two, so you're going to the second meeting.
Yes, we are going to that second meeting, which will be really helpful to actually get through the amount of work that needs to occur between now and then. The second point is specifically to the commissioners that you would have seen in the agenda that not all the changes you've asked for have been made. It's a matter of the timing, as Joe talked about, trying to get everything contained. We are working on having a chart. The table that was sent was really helpful, and we'll be responding to every point in that individually, whether it was fully agreed with or what the change would be, how that's reflected. The last thing I'd like to add would be in terms of some additional work that hasn't been before the committee that we've alluded to, but that I thought I would go through. So we talked at the workshop about having a comprehensive residential development rule. That's still in development, and the intention is to include a comprehensive residential rule initially within the medium density residential zone only. It may be that in the future it was extended to the other residential zones or the mixed use zone, but we think at this point it's probably worth targeting at that area. The other parts are a fossil rule. We talked about that earlier, the Category 3 fossil future, what's it called? Future of severely affected land, that the Category 3 properties that council either own or are in the process, well advanced in the process of buying. There was a suggestion that having a new general, they're all in the, what would be in the new general residential zone. We didn't want to leave a new general residential zone in there without something over the top. So our intention is to include a rule that lists those properties with their legal descriptions and makes having a habitable building on those properties prohibited activity. And that we think is a good holding place to wait until the next phase when we do the full review of all of the hazards. So it's a signal there. So that's coming. The other is the heritage protection zone. We have quite an unusual heritage protection zone that's not really, because we're putting a new residential zone, this isn't an overlay at the moment in the existing plan, it's a zone on its own. Our intention is to actually rehouse that. So rather than it go through a Schedule 1 process, because it won't effectively change, we would be introducing an overlay into the proposed plan over those specific properties, because our individual properties across the general residential zone that would have an overlay that basically would bring the same rules across. And we think that that's appropriate to do as a non-Schedule 1 process. And so we're proposing to introduce that into the draft. The last 2 points are, and we talked about this earlier, about now not having a minimum number of car parks in a plan because the NPSUD required us to remove them, is to introduce a trip generation rule that identifies activities that would create a threshold of number of trips per day on the particular road they would be, whether it would be an arterial, a collector or a local road, and then require a integrated traffic assessment to be completed to see whether they were required to have car parks. That's similar to one that has been introduced in the Far North District Plan just recently, and we think that that would be a good way to go there. And the last one was we haven't brought to you individually the changes that will need to happen to the subdivision chapter because that was already in the chart with the lot sizes, those sorts of things. So we would be introducing individual changes to the existing chapters, the general chapters across. Happy to answer any questions.
Okay, let's start with council. So I want to say to councillors, please relax. There will be more than one opportunity if you've got more, because we're dealing with a big area here. And even when we start with questions and you want to dig further into some areas, please, this is not a once, usually at council, we do try to stick to standing orders, but this, we want to give everyone the opportunity to ask whatever they need to ask. We're going to start with Councillor Foster.
Yeah, thank you. We've got a Kaiti master plan, an Elgin master plan and everything, but it's kind of come to light that general residential out at Wainui and the infill that's starting to happen out there is becoming a bit of a concern to the community out there. So what are we going to do about their concerns and how, do we need a Wainui master plan to identify Wainui as a different area because it's the biggest unreticulated community in the country? So, we've got things that are kind of going outside of what we originally intended out there by some infill that's happening, which is setting a precedent. So how do we mitigate, how do we work on this?
So, through you, Your Worship, as you remember, this is not the only district plan change we'll be doing. This is just the first, and was given priority because of the housing shortage and the real need to try and make it easier to put in more housing in the urban area, the very urban area of Tairāwhiti. Second plan change will be coming, and that will include Wainui and think about how we specifically treat Wainui. So there is some work going on in the background, but at the moment, just in this particular period, the focus is on the urban area to get that notified.
The horse is almost bolting, so how do we, how much time do we have before we make this second plan? Because once you allow some infill to happen, how do you stop it being the norm? Because people are starting to think, oh well, if they're doing it, why can't I do it? And if you allow one or two people to do it, then like I said, the horse is bolted almost.
It is difficult, and just to note, it also needs to link in with the infrastructure discussions and the stormwater planning that's happening at the moment. That's sort of happening, and we're working very closely with that team too. And just to note that I believe central government will be making some cabinet decisions shortly on the 60 metres squared granny flat or secondary dwelling, and that may mean that our plans and rules have no effect anyway in terms of that.
And also capacity, if you think just what we're dealing with here, with the little chunks that we have identified as priority, I think that's also, we need to be realistic how we chomp away at the elephant. Ka pai? Councillor Ria, thank you.
I just, before I start, because I have about three questions in regards to the paper, but for the RPS, is that a part of this paper? Because I see it's also, there's a review of the RPS in a later paper, so where do I address my questions about the RPS? Would it be now, or would it be later on in the piece?
So if it's about, the only bit of the RPS that's covered in this paper is that very targeted bit about some wording specific to urban matters, urban growth and development. If it's more widely about the RPS, then later.
Okay. Okay, well I'll leave my questions for later then.
Okay.
And I'll just focus on my questions for this report. My question was for the standards, and the standards part of the paper, and those are pages 75 to 80, 104 to 108, 123, like there's quite a few groups of them. Which of the options on the table on page 31 are those standards based on? Are they based on a single, is it based on option 1, option 2 or option 3?
It's based on option 2. The option that was preferred at the council workshop.
So
It was the balanced yield one.
thank you. I just wanted some clarity around that. I really love the descriptions in the policies, page 35 to 36. The only concern that I had was on page 31 in the table again, it's the setbacks. So I can't fully comprehend the landscaping meterage numbering, but when I put it into a sense of the setback dimensions, when I envisage that in a house, it's if it's 1.5 from the front of the house, actually that's only about 1.2 to 1 metre. On the side, it only becomes about 800 millimetres. It's not a full metre. And so when I think about a place that stays within the, we've had this conversation about not changing somewhat the landscape of some of our communities, that it's so different that it's not recognisable to the people who have lived in those areas for a long, long time. So those setbacks, so there were the meterage for landscaping, and then there's the setbacks. The setbacks gave me a clearer picture on what I thought it would actually look like with a house on it. Is that right?
Yes.
Okay.
to check. Got to check.
I have a question about iwi hapu engagement. How is it going? Where are we having movement and contributions? Where is more support needed? And I'm sure Rawani would agree with me when I say, as a Māori Board Councillor, we're very passionate about the TRMP, and we would like to help, encourage and support that engagement in any way possible if it's helpful.
Good.
So I just want to know kind of where is that sitting?
Can you step in?
So we are, after a fairly long period of relatively quiet time, it's now, I don't want to quite say all on, but there's a lot happening. We, particularly with our 4 kind of bigger iwi, because we are establishing agreements that basically help us support them to build capacity and capability and engage in a really meaningful way. That's further progressed with Mahaki at the moment. That's more in the regional policy space, but also looking at starting to look at this urban planning work. There have been some quite intense discussions with Ngāti Parau and also with Ngāti Onioni, but maybe not directly with the chair, about how we engage on particularly the urban, the Masterplan for Kaiti. Katarina in the room, she's probably more across where we're at than I am. We've recently had Katarina seconded over from the resource consents team to join us to help support the TRMP Mahi and particularly Tāngata Whenua engagement. So she's working in the Māori Partnerships team and is making a real difference as well in terms of what's happening. You want to give a brief update, Katarina or Jean?
Come on, Kat.
You ready?
Or Jean?
I'm going to throw you out there if you don't want to.
Yeah. Sorry.
Have a seat here next to Councillor Foster.
You'll come at the front.
Yeah, take the hot seat. Kia ora.
And also the point if there's any support that we need.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Hoi anō, tēnā tātou. Hene tuku atua tai ki tēnei o ngā tira nārera he mei koutou tēnei kia koutou, kia koe Councillor Wharinga, nā i tēnei hui tūwhira mō te tātou Karakia, nā reo mini kātika kia koutou. Ki ngā kai komi ana me ngā kai kaunihira he mihi nui ro atu kia koutou. And tika, I have joined as in a secondment in the team as recently as possibly 8 weeks ago. I'm not sure now, because it's so full on. Hoi anō. Lots of movement, but we do need support. Our team does need support, and I think that's the reason why I've been pulled in to try and alleviate some of that from our team. And although there is momentum, it's not enough, and it's not fast enough. And I recognise that, and our team recognises that. So, he pātai ni.
Supplementaries?
Yep.
Or have you got something? Just while we're having this conversation, I think it might be worth exploring that. So is it your perspective that while there is energy being put into the meaningful engagement with iwi, is it your opinion that the issue around engagement is around experience and expertise on their side, or capacity?
However, it's different for each. Yeah, definitely a lot of our partners are ready, they are experienced, they do have capabilities. It's us catching up. And then there are some that aren't ready and need as much support as we can offer.
And when you say us catching up, you mean us as in council? And then how many supplementary?
And go. Yeah. Because what we are here to do is to offer support to our team. That's what you're trying to establish.
That's right. And the reason I'm sort of engaging in this line of questioning is that on more than one occasion, particularly Aubrey and myself, Ani who's not here, we understand that there's a level, there's a difference between governance and operations. However, on more than one occasion, the Māori wards have bridged that gap. And supported council in ways to have those conversations with our iwi partners. We would like to support that, and then we would also like to participate in that conversation so we too can understand if they feel like they're getting a meaningful engagement, because sometimes it might be our approach. What we've found over time is that often it is the way council approaches iwi that causes a disconnect. So I'm very keen in ensuring that, or offering the support. And going forward, I think it's really important to capture that information as part of the pack, of the board pack, because understanding what steps we've taken in terms of meaningful engagement will help us to understand, as a council, what is our approach to working with our treaty partners? How are we trying? How are we reflecting on the way we engage? And what's our experiences, so that we will have a better understanding of how we're developing in that space. That's my main
I was
question.
just going to ask Jean, do you want to also supplement or add to what Kat and Rawenia were talking about?
Through you, Madam Chair, tēnā tātou. I mean, to Kat's point, there's a spectrum of treaty rights and interests, tangata whenua relationships that we have to consider. What I want to be clear about is Council is growing its understanding and its knowledge of our knitting, so to speak. And what I mean by that is it's really understanding the breadth of those relationships. For example, iwi entities who have been through a settlement process, obviously supported through the treaty settlement legislation, statutory acknowledgements and the likes. However, it's also understanding, potentially from that perspective, that the rights and interests of whānau, hapu, marae, Māori landowners are not necessarily usurped in any way, shape or form, and that actually, as council, we have a responsibility for consistency in the way we offer and approach right across that spectrum. However, depending on the legislative mechanisms or settlement legislation, that often requires some slightly different considerations in the way that we have to move. So I guess getting to the point of your pātai, Councillor Parata, the practice that we've adopted is approach and be guided and directed. If I'm to probably pull out a consistent theme in terms of the way that we engage and where we often are challenged, is to some of the points that Katarina raised before. And it's varying right across that spectrum of relationships. But for me it is time, because when we reach out to nominated points of contact, whether they be hapu leads, whether they be marae committee, whether they be landowners, whether they be iwi chief executives, it's not a straightforward transaction and process, because those points of contact then have to go deep into their constituencies and within their whānau and within their groupings. And I think the work program that's in front of us is a testament that what we often require, and I'm not saying our kaimahi, what the work often requires, always puts pressure on our ability to do things in a nice, lined up, coherent way. And there are, across that spectrum, for example, we could take the relationship between Ngāti Porou and Ngāti Onioni in this context, but that doesn't mean we're just dealing with George and Kokasha. Hey, they have to go back within their people, they have to go and do their own sense checking, because at the same time, while Katerina may have been having lovely kōrero with Tash and would have reached out a month ago and things like that, it doesn't mean that everybody has the same information and that everybody is connected. So going back to that point of how we engage, what have we learned? Coming from a whānau background, and I see that's under a bit of pressure at the moment, but those values apply in this space, and it's whānau-led, whānau-centred, strengths-based. And in this context, it's treaty partner-led, treaty partner-centred, and based on the strengths of treaty partner. And our approach is to reach out, to ask and seek guidance. I can, hand on heart, look across this team and say that aside from a timeline, for example, we have election this year that's really affecting our ability to take time, so we have to cram things in before here. It's those dynamics that influence, I think, what our true ability could be able to work in a manner that gives us this beautiful lead-in that we need on our side, but then also too, it's us having a huge appreciation and understanding for what is occurring on the partnership side of things. And there's this wonderful dynamic dance that occurs in this space of us trying to get together to be able to have the kōrero with the right groupings at the right time. So I think at a high level, I believe that our approach is correct in the sense that we're seeking to be led. And if I when I say led in how, where the table's set, what's on the menu, I feel that we offer that consistently. And I feel that that approach aligns with and upholds not only our commitment to the Treaty Compass framework, but our requirements as a treaty partner, strategically and legislatively. It is a dynamic space to work in, and to that point where the relationships go deep, and then when we speak to a point of contact, we're not necessarily going to get endorsement or the answer or the hui that week or in a fortnight. And the only way I could potentially see us being able to enhance this is, which we've attempted to do, but it's really collectivising everything. So if I'm thinking about the Coastal Adaptation Plan in the Ngāti Onioni, Ngāti Porou context, Coastal Adaptation Plan, the Kaiti Master Planning, and all those kia kotahi ai rā kōrero, sit down and have all of those for us to sit down and understand what type of support, resourcing is required from a Ngāti Onioni perspective. To sit down with Ngāti Onioni and Ngāti Porou and say, what are our expectations of each other in this space? Who runs what lane, and how are we connected in our understanding? And we try and fill those gaps. We can't tell, I can't advise my cousin Kiriana over at Ngāti Porou and go, cuz, we need to go over and have a hui, and it needs to happen like this. I can't do that in this capacity. Our role is to facilitate a space where we can be, where we listen, where we learn, against an articles-based approach to our relationships with tangata whenua. So I feel that we have a consistent approach, which is to be transparent, to be as early as we can, and to be guided. What we receive in regards to that is what we have to work with. And again, I don't say that disrespectfully, but I think our approach to that relationship and that way of working is consistent with our commitments and requirements as a treaty partner. It's just how all of that lands. It gets, sometimes it's complex, sometimes it's straightforward. Yeah.
Thank you.
Tēnā kōrua, tūtahi tēnā kōrua mō kōrua whakamaramutanga. I really do, especially after reading these set of papers, believe that there is a step in the process missing, and it doesn't sit at the Māori partnership teams. It is before it gets to Māori partnership teams, when it's sitting with our other teams, because these documents we are writing for Māori, not with Māori. And that's a huge issue I have when we're going to them with a paper that doesn't reflect them, that has none of their input, and then we're trying to get them to buy into something that they're not reflected in. And that is a huge issue. I mean, I'm a planner. You inform your documents and your reports on pre-meeting, pre-planning. So when you engage iwi prior to writing the documents, and then you put the document out and it already contains the cultural lens, it is a true partnership and reflection that council has and iwi and hapu are working together, and this is our collaborative approach. And then we put it out into the community. That is a meaningful partnership, not writing for, writing with, using engagement to inform reports, inform strategy, inform policy. Kia ora.
Kia ora.
Did you want to, because my understanding was we did have consultation in the beginning, did we not? I thought we, just touching on from that, I thought we did have pre-consultation.
At a high level, and I guess talking about the Tairāwhiti program as a whole here, that opportunity has absolutely been put on the table. Again, I 100% agree, Councillor Leah, tautoko katoa i o whakaro i o kōrero. And I don't want to be disrespectful, but the timing for all this great stuff was probably really 2 years ago. When we had initially been reaching out, we had been seeking tangata whenua governance representation on this particular committee. And again, I'm not suggesting that there's being disrespectful, but I felt, I'm not saying it was great, but we've put opportunities on the table for a long time, I felt, to have that exact type of discussion. And in a lot of the instances, we were told no. We were not interested necessarily, and I 100% agree with you that that is the way to go. And if anything, to your earlier offer of support, it's probably, e kore e muri e hokia, we are unable to sort of go back and rewind 2 years, but I would certainly love to look at some of the future opportunities, or the current and future opportunities, and think, how do we learn from those experiences and take exactly what you've shared, Councillor Leah, and actually set ourselves up with the current and the future space now, so that we're not having the same kōrero in maybe a year or two. But I 100% agree with what you've said. We'd love to be able to achieve that standard consistently, and really, really keen to look at any opportunities we can to make that the way that we do things.
Through you, Your Worship, just to add to this, really the opportunity was probably about 4 years ago. This has been a long journey, and it's now, unfortunately, we're at a time where there's a real housing shortage in Tairāwhiti, and we had to make some kind of progress. And now also the interest has been generated as well, so whether that's as a result of more obvious action being apparent, or just because the time is right, I don't know. I do love your feedback about there have been many past engagements, and that the tono to the team to incorporate that in documents before they go out, and that has been a bit of a question mark, I suppose, on many of the team. Do we do that, or do we need to wait before we hear it on this specific piece of work before incorporating those views? And I really appreciate that strong direction. No, you go and incorporate all you can with your best intentions, and then go out. And I personally support that view too, so I'm very glad to have that feedback loud and clear, so I should pass that on to the team. Because we have had many engagements and lots of feedback, it's just not been specific on this very specific piece of work.
Yeah, I just wanted to chime in on this, and probably this will be the last we talk about it, is that so many of the reasons that our treaty partners push back on us is they feel dictated to. I can appreciate the expertise in this agenda, but I will not lie, it was painful to read. It's hard to read, it's not easy to read, and I can tell that a lot of work has gone into making it easier to digest, but even then, it's painful. And to receive a document like this and be told, give us your thoughts, no. You know, like, it's difficult and it's challenging, and I think potentially the opportunity for council going forward is to think, how can we do this in a way that they can feed in? And I've said this before, that our community and our partners, they have thoughts, but we constantly need to question ourselves, but can they digest it in this way? Do they understand it in this way? Is there a different way we can do it? Is wānanga the way to do it? Is workshopping it a way to do it? And I'm not saying that we haven't tried that, and I'm also conscious that, like Joe said, this started 4 years ago. We're at the tail end of it now, and we probably will have no choice but to send it to iwi and ask them to endorse it at this stage. But going forward, we need to be a council that works differently, that tries to do things differently, that tries to work with them. Because if we do it this way, if we get them to feed in early, if we get them to participate in the development of it, not only will our language look different, the way that Tairāwhiti does things will look different, but we will not have to push it down their throats later. They will endorse it because they see themselves in it. But I also acknowledge,
Not for lack of effort.
No.
Yeah, that's what I mean. I also acknowledge the effort, and I also acknowledge the journey we've taken and how far we've come. So that wasn't a criticism.
And what we've been through
Exactly.
the last 3 years.
It's not a criticism of council at all. I understand that a lot of the work that comes to the table now started before we came to the table, but we're here now. So moving forward, the mahi that we start now needs to look different. But yeah, that's it. Thank you.
And we have to, by law, send the draft documents. That won't be all we send. There'll be a lot of, yeah, extra information around it, not just here you go.
I'm just going to have to, Larry.
I just think important to actually recognise the heavy lifting of the teams, the likes of Vivishin and Shane, and while we may be perceived as to be the face of that space, actually the capability lifting of our building sits with these teams, and it's us working with them, but actually nā rātou anō ngā mahi, I koke, so we're all building and growing together, but I think important to acknowledge Joe's team and all the mahi that goes on in there. Kia ora.
Larry.
Just a little bit, I'm just kind of thinking, is it only now that people are realising how important these documents are for the future of this region? Because the invitation has been around for 3 years for Iwi to participate on this committee, 6 spots, and not one has been taken up. So, I mean, and that's where it should have been, right from the start, and that's where the input would have come right from the start and everyone would have owned it. But here we are, after 3 years of trying to get input and encouragement of having outside iwi influence on this right from the start, it's just not there. And so is there a communication problem, or are people just realising now how important this document is and where we're going to? Because I can understand the frustration that they must have, but the other side is that, what more can we do to try and allow people to be involved with all this decision making?
Well, I'm going to give it a go. We have had 3 years of tough times, not only for council, not only for farmers, not only for foresters, for iwi, for hapu, also doing a lot of work, because what we need to remember, even though we've reached out, and I really want to acknowledge Jean for what we have tried to set up. We are a leader council in this space, we are. But iwi also deal with the government. They also are making submissions on the RMA, on the 3 waters. So we have a resourced organisation that can work and employ staff and do it in a certain way with the best of intentions. Because let me tell you, Jean and his team really go out of their way to try and get the best info at the right times. Taking into account what we have gone through, iwi has also been flat out doing stuff, not always resourced to comment on all our resource consents that are sent their way, or having the time or the expertise sometimes, because we as a council struggle to get experts and pay for that. So I acknowledge both sides. I acknowledge Jean and his team, and this team have really been trying hard, but it's not just straightforward of suddenly realising it's important. They know it's important, they want to be part of it, but it is always a dance, how we get there, because people are busy, people have other stuff that also, that feel like more existential, that they need to address first. So I hear what you're saying, Councillor Foster, and I'm not minimising it. I'm just, from my experience over the last 3 years, we've been through relationship-wise tough times, not just with us, iwi, hapu, with our community. So relationships has struggled. They're getting stronger by the day, and I'm really proud of the work we do. But the input that you guys are giving is priceless for us. So thank you also for your offer to support Kat and Jean and the team in that journey, because Rawenia, we do want to do it better. We do want to do it different. But sometimes if we do reach out and there's not the time or the capacity to, we have to carry on, because we cannot wait. And we might extend a few invitations, but then by law, we also need to do work. So it is an imperfect dance, but always room for improvement. So thank you for your input, and I acknowledge what you say as well, Councillor Foster. Councillor Wharehinga and then Sarah, thank you.
Thank you very much, Your Worship. I'm not going to relitigate your part there, but I would like to reinforce the huge workload and unresourced workload that our iwi partners have. But I do just want to remind us as well, because the comment was made that just realising now that the TRMP is important, our own community doesn't even know that the TRMP is important. You know, like this isn't an iwi thing. This plan is so huge and so complex that it's really difficult to just get general buy-in and general understanding of how important it is. We all know how important it is because we're councillors. We deal with this thing day in and day out in every meeting, so we know the importance. But we know our community don't think that it's important. We had single digits of people turn up to our own public meetings, guys. This is not an iwi issue. The lack of engagement is not iwi specific. It is community-wide specific and just something that is endemic to a council having to do these massive, monstrous plans that the common Gisborneite is very difficult to fathom and understand. I receive messages all the time. What is this TRMP about? And my reply is, it's only the most important document we're going to work on for the next 50 years. And they're like, why don't I know about this? And I was like, it's really difficult to communicate that to you. You know, so it's wider. It's wider than just iwi. And I just wanted to make sure that was on the record.
Because another comment, sorry that I speak so much, usually I don't speak so much.
That's
Another comment I wanted to make is there's this dichotomy where you want to make it easy for people to read and understand, but it is complex and legislation and rules. So you're trying to make something digestible for the community, but it is difficult to, even for people that have been around the table and have experiences, it is still difficult. So it is like a perfect storm. You want to get buy-in from the community, but it is really complex. So, anywho, who wanted to speak next? Sarah, and then, yeah.
Oh, yes, so we've just hijacked Aubrey's.
I wasn't quite finished my 3 questions.
Sorry.
You go, and then we go to Sarah.
And it really is just a little addition, and it was in on the recommendations part where it referred to iwi taiao technicians. Now, it's my understanding that every iwi has an iwi taiao technician, but that those particular roles are now becoming more tailor-made to suit and be more fit for purpose for what iwi want. And in considering that, for us to be mindful that can help to guide and should be in addition to, but not the pit stop of engagement cannot end at iwi taiao technicians. So that was my last thing that I kind of wanted to add in there. Thank you.
Sarah, the floor is yours. Go for gold.
Thanks, Your Worship. I'm going to jump out of my RMA Commissioner focus, and it's a question unloaded in the Local Government Act space. Have iwi hapu Māori been resourced or allocated resource to participate in this plan process? Because that's often a way of...
Through you, in short, yes. And what we're currently, yes, this budget, yes, some of that budget has been used in the past, and we're just now re-looking about how it's used for the next 1 to 2 years. So there's live discussions underway.
But it is allocated.
It is allocated within our budget, yes. What we're finding, and unexpectedly, is that the iwi want to look broader than just the TRMP project. So there's just a little bit of a dance going on as to how we incorporate those totally valid wishes. But make sure that we're not resourcing the whole of council to do its meaningful engagement through our project line. Councillor Balder.
I've got more questions for Shane.
Good, perfect. And also, what I wanted to say, usually I break up big. I'm not going to go through each attachment. We workshop that, so I'm not going to do that. So please feel free to jump around, and we can jump back to stuff. There's more than enough time, so the floor is yours, Councillor Balder. No pressure. We've got more than enough time.
So, a few questions requiring short answers. In the attachments, page 35 to 77, generally, how different are those attachments to previous rules and regulations?
Previous rules and regulations that this committee has seen for the plan change or existing now?
Existing
In the
now.
current.
In the current plan. If we're talking about the ones that are on the standards for the medium density residential zone, they're quite significantly different to what you would see in the general residential zone in the existing plan.
But the others are. How would those rules and regulations compare to, for example, Whakatane? Are they a template of something Whakatane would have as well?
I'm not sure whether Whakatane have done a plan change to implement what the Whakatane are, will be a tier 3 council, so they don't have to apply the medium density residential rules that other larger councils have, and whether they have completed a plan change. I actually worked for them when their last plan change occurred back 6 or 7 years ago, so they wouldn't be ready to do a review of their plan at the moment. So the medium density residential rules and the standards that we're suggesting now for the medium density residential zone in Gisborne would be different than you would have in Whakatane as well. They'll be more allowing for a greater density of development within that area.
So Gisborne having one of the lowest average wages, and our requirement for fit for need and affordable houses, we do require something special to happen here to accommodate our low socioeconomic area. Do you agree? Yeah.
It is, affordability is very difficult. And one of the ways that this is attempting to at least make it more affordable, not suggesting it would make it affordable, is to allow the land to be used more efficiently. So more dense development provides for more dwellings on the same area, therefore the land value is used more, the land is used more efficiently.
And so this government initiative to allow 60 squares out the back is a good idea, and yet it could conflict with some of our own regulations, and it's suggested somewhere in there that it is conflicting with some of our regulations. And I'm guessing, are they mainly to do with stormwater?
I'm not sure where it said in the paper that we were conflicting with
I've
the
been one of the
government.
references that I might have followed.
Oh, okay. All right. Okay.
One of the stepping stones that this was built on, for example. So where I'm going with this is, you know, kautoko and something Councillor Forringer said earlier, our engagement with this paper, and I don't think I've missed many, has been abysmal, I feel. I've been out in the country when we're talking potholes with Tim Berry and Dave Hadfield, and we get big turnouts of people that want to engage. So if something is wrapped properly, people do want to engage, and yet we've badly missed the engagement process here, I feel, and I think it's disappointing at this stage of the game.
That's early engagement. Was that
Early engagement,
Not the
yeah,
regular
there'll be
Well,
more.
middle and end, it's all.
Through your worship, there was significant engagement with the FDS, which was more significant than we have achieved this time. As Councillor Whalihinga said and other councillors said, it is really difficult to engage people on a RMA plan review. I've been involved in many over the years, and it's like pulling teeth to try and get people along. And I even tried one time and then wasn't allowed to do it, to put in false ads in the newspaper to try and suggest a boatyard was going next to a really flash suburb.
Just today.
10 out of 10 for trying.
And it was deemed not to be appropriate to do that, and so we didn't do that.
Glad to hear that.
And engagement was low, and generally people don't understand how important it is until they want to do something or their neighbour wants to do something they don't like. And I'm not sure how we get around that.
Perhaps we should have tagged it on the Grey Street meeting.
Ignore that sour comment and move on to someone who wants to ask a constructive question. Any other questions? Councillor Parata. Or what? You finished, Councillor Alder? Let's move on to your neighbour.
I did just have a question, and it might just be my memory, but I thought we said 3 stories was too many stories. Did we say that at one of the workshops? That I see it in this paper that we're suggesting that particularly in Kaiti, like 3-story buildings, but I'm pretty sure we said we didn't want that in Kaiti. Did we say that or did we not say that?
In the suburb, that kind of thing. Where that corridor, it was actually one of the points that you made around having more on the main routes, Wainui Road, near shopping centre for our
Yeah, so have I misunderstood it? So we're not suggesting that those can just go up everywhere?
That's limited to the medium density residential areas, and in the Kaiti area that's been reduced significantly to those main roads, Wainui Road, Rupuni Road, and not going out into the other suburbs that it was in the previous draft.
Yeah. Thank you for that clarification. I didn't quite understand that. Thank you.
I think it's very, very good to reinforce that. I think it's actually very good to consistently keep reminding that that's the position that we made. Yeah.
Okay, can I just have people not chatting and asking questions if they wanted to ask questions through the chair? Alan, let's go.
Thank you, Your Worship. I'll head off into another topic. I'm not going to talk about the zones. I've given you the comments, and I see there are some changes, and those look like they're heading in the right direction. But what it does raise for me, Sarah and I were seconded onto this committee to help you, and I understand that's about content and process. And I was looking at the terms of reference and what this committee's about. And I suppose I'm just, I have a niggling concern about the process. What we've got in front of us are provisions which are still being worked on. They're not finished. I've only seen one mention of the Section 32 evaluation report on page 354. None of us have seen the Section 32 report. What the legislation requires is for, and that terms of reference, my understanding is this committee recommends, here's all the documents, Council, these are what we think the plan change should be. The Council says, that's good, thank you very much, committee, you've done a great job. That draft, along with the Section 32 and all the background reports, goes to iwi for their advice.
Excuse me.
That advice comes back to the Council, and you have to have particular regard to that advice. The Council has no scope to change the plan change outside of that advice. So what we put forward to the Council essentially is the proposed plan change, and it should be complete and finished, and I don't see that. I think as my role is to say I'm uncomfortable with that approach, because I'm not doing my job, I'm not doing what you pay me to do.
I just want to clarify for myself to understand what you're saying.
Yeah.
This committee, the terms of reference, is to make a recommendation to Council. How we would deal mostly with stuff like this as a council, like we would do with hearings, if a committee makes a recommendation to Council, there's not really the opportunity, because functionally we can only pass it at a council meeting. Yes. It is not like it is going to be because those people were not on the committee to work on it.
And that's my concern.
Yes.
I haven't seen the Section 32.
Yes.
We're still writing the provisions.
Yeah.
And the Section 32 is the justification for the provisions. So I'm concerned that we are doing something here. And so from my point of view, I'm struggling to be able to say I'm comfortable with the recommendation that it goes forward.
Can we have a comment, for a process comment? I don't have an
I understand the time frames and everything like that, What I'm concerned about is that council, when this goes out for submissions and what have you, you can be challenged on content and you can be challenged on process. And the waste of time is being challenged on process. There's nothing you can do about that. Content, you can deal with. Process wrong, you go back. It's High Court and that's really hard. I don't think that the council wants to do that. So I'd like some discussion around how we get around that. And I apologise that I bring this to the table in about my third or fourth meeting, but it is sort of
That's why you're here, Alan.
It's just catching up.
Absolutely. No, thank you for that.
That's all right, thank you.
And I will leave that to the team, because I don't have an answer, but the
no,
process
no.
team will know how we work with this.
Through your worship. My reading of 4A is the section 32. So the section 32 still is a work in progress, and I totally accept I'm a little uncomfortable with the state we're at too. Ideally, when we're at this point, we would have got far more advanced. Yep, got the full package there. My understanding of section 4A is that we send the draft plan change to iwi. There's no reading in there about this 32 being attached to that.
No, that's not. You're correct. What it does require is then you amend the section 32, summarise the advice, and that's all that you can do. That's my reading and my process that I've used in other jurisdictions.
Yeah, and obviously all that will be coming back here before anything is notified.
Yes.
I mean, that's...
My understanding is the council on the 19th it is now is sending it out to approving it. So essentially what we...
No, they're approving a release of a draft to iwi, not for...
That's correct. What I'm saying is the draft has to essentially be the full package, because once the council sent it to iwi...
I think I'm reading the RMA slightly differently. I'm sure that's probably been the practice, but if iwi came back and said, we hate this draft and there's this issue, this issue, this issue, and we had to do some substantial rework, then my reading of the intent of the RMA is that you then take that into account and maybe pause, and you might have come back with a totally different plan change, and that would come through this committee and then go to council.
That's fine, but my concern is that we are recommending something to the council that I haven't seen.
Yeah. So we will absolutely circulate what that ends up looking like before it goes to that council meeting as well.
So there's a commitment that will come to
Because
everyone.
obviously our commissioners won't be at that council meeting, whereas the other members of the committee will. Yeah.
And I'm more than happy for you to Zoom, be part of, if
That might be
councillors...
quite useful.
If councillors are, so we will liaise with you on the day, because it will also where we are at the council meeting, but maybe if you are available for the 20 minutes, and there might be no questions, but there might be questions which is of the technical nature that only the two of you can answer from a committee member's perspective.
Yes.
So we'll make sure. So do I get from this, there's an undertaking in the next while, everything that's being sent to council will be sent to this committee for feedback, which we can receive on the day as well, and then take it from there. Does that give you more comfort?
Thank you, Your Worship.
Awesome. Any more questions? Sarah?
Madam Chair, I appreciate that the section 32 in particular will probably be warts and all, and there's no expectation from me that it would be anything other. It's just, from my perspective, completeness. We've provided comments on the drafting of provisions to date. Warts and all is fine, and it continues to refine, but we just need the whole package. On that, I did have, I'll just provide high-level feedback on the drafting at this stage. As previously, I've got a list of really detailed comments on specific provisions, but to try and be helpful, I think before things are finalised, it would be good to have a final review to get rid of unnecessary wording and consolidate provisions, in particular objectives. There are a lot that could be consolidated. Really important to use clear unambiguous wording, particularly because these have regulatory effect. In the freshwater provisions, and sorry, this is bouncing around outside, but I just thought it would be helpful to maybe not map intervention logic, because that's a big process, but get a really clear line of sight between the NPS FM provisions and what you're doing in your plan change, so that if everything or anything changes later on, easy to see where those provisions came from, because they are likely to change. Yeah. The final thing, in some of the rules, there are fairly loose words around thresholds, you know, like when you're talking about traffic movements, you reference significant traffic movements. That's an element of discretion, which in a performance standard is a bit problematic. So if you could quantify the number of traffic movements, yeah, that would just tighten things up. And I've got 4 pages of comments I'll flip through.
Thank you. Thank you. And I think now, before we pass it, is the time also just, I don't do it often enough, to thank our 2 commissioners, their input and also guiding all of us. Some of us have been part of this process and know relatively bits about it, but we also have new members, so the in-depth knowledge that you bring also in supporting our staff and helping us to see the bigger picture is really appreciated. So thank you for that. So, yes, you can ask questions. We're on page 18 at the recommendations at this stage.
So in terms of 3B, since the draft plan changed the iwi authorities are required by clause 4A. Are we talking about this, or are we just talking about just the urban?
Just the urban.
Yeah. That are in this report.
Yeah.
Thank you.
So if we're on page 18, there are a few recommendations, so provide feedback. So thank you, Sarah is sending more. If you've got more, please get back to Shane or Joe. Note that further amendments will be made to the draft plan before it's going to council. And also there is the undertaking, noted, not in the recommendations, that it will be sent to all of us before then. And then number 3, recommend the contents, confirms the content of the draft plan, including all the amendments that will be sent through to Shane and the team. And then last, send the draft plan change to iwi authorities as required by clause 4A, first schedule, the RMA 1991. I'm happy to move that. Seconded by Councillor Wharehinga. All in favour, contrary, carried, coffee. 5 minutes past, let's get back. Moving to our Kaiti master plan. Hello, Vivian. Good to see you. Okay, we're going to pass over to the 2 of you. And so, councillors, we're on page 295, progress of our Kaiti master plan. And I wanted to say these maps are really interesting. It was so good to see all the water and the roads and the different stuff in here. You don't always think all those things need to fit on top of each other and make sense for a community. Thank you for that. Over to you.
Thank you. Your worship.
I do work hard.
You do make us work. So this is an update on progress, really an opportunity to provide some feedback on what's presented at a high level now, and I'll let Vivian provide a very brief intro.
And to your worship. Well enough. So this is the progress report of the progress we're making on the development of the Kaiti master plan. And I will take it as read, but I will also add to that as, and I think some of the corridor that we've been having before around engagement, and we're looking at an engagement opportunity this weekend at the Kaiti Hub, looking to really get out into the community and provide more opportunities to socialize this work with our community. So I just wanted to add that in as well.
You're open for questions.
Thank you.
let's go, page 295. This is just an update for us on the maps that they're working on. We're asking for some community feedback. The brave ones will be there at 6 a.m. on Saturday morning. I hope there's coffee available. There will be.
Sure there'll be coffee.
Coffee available. That's like a minimum requirement. Anyone to mobilise at 6 a.m. Councillor Wharehinga.
Thank you very much, Your Worship. Hey, kia ora Vivishin. Thank you very much to the team for bringing this, and also committing to what we agreed. Or I guess I can speak a bit more frankly because I'm not running for council. Well, what I feel like I was able to manoeuvre in this room in order to get Kaiti to be a priority, to get that draft master plan here prior to the next election cycle. Thank you very much for meeting that commitment that we made in this room and bringing this document here today. It really, really heartens me. I'm on my way out, and I was very clear that there's two big things for me. This is one of those big things. I want to take us to page, I think it's 316. Yep, 316. It's that final map in regards to intensification exploration. And it links into what Councillor Parata was mentioning in the last hui, which was around the intensification was less desirable in terms of the 3-story, but there was the specific focus around two things around the Kaiti discussions. And they were around the iwi aspirations for infill housing and that more intense building in the along that main arterial route, along Wainui Road. That doesn't look like that's what this map says. And I do understand that those slight lines also mean minor constraints, but the thing that I just said in terms of I guess constraints and permissibility to me does not match like a minor constraint definition. So I'm not saying paint the whole thing black and no go, but there was a discussion about these are the things we want to try to be permissive around. This is the part that we want to actually be, I guess I don't want to say very permissive, but that permissive stuff around 3 stories, close to where that little township is, along that main road, for younger couples wanting to kind of live in their own little apartment, that kind of thing. But then there are areas where we're like, nah, you can't, this is too far away. So I just wanted to give that high-level feedback. I'm not too sure what you guys would do in regards to maybe adjusting that. I'm thinking it's a comms thing. I'm thinking it's also a key thing on this map. But that's the feedback that I wanted to give. I can see the intentions there, but I can also see how this could be misinterpreted as something different, not only by our community, but potentially, as Ms. Noble is demonstrating, we all have staff that will depart and then be replaced, and they may interpret the thing on the paper differently too.
Just to also clarify that this is also a work in progress as well. It's something to guide us along the way and build up the picture as we progress towards the development of a draft. We also note that we still need to consider other matters such as infrastructure constraints, and there's other aspects that still need to help us paint a fuller picture of this. So it's where we are at now. We've looked at accessibility and some of the known constraints we've picked up, but this picture will still develop.
So to clarify, this isn't necessarily something we'd go out to the general public with, maybe to those kind of working in the field, but it informs the material we do present to the public, if that makes sense. That particular map.
Councillor Foster, and then Councillor Ria.
Yeah, thank you. Kāinga Ora are a huge landowner, and they own a lot of property in this area, and they tend to just go and do whatever they like. So, we're saying that we don't in this plan we don't want 3-story buildings in the areas that are being designated as non, but they can just go in and do whatever they like, and they will. But my question is there any alignment with Kaingaora and communication with them to have an influence on what their plans will be. Because at the end of the day, we can say whatever we like, and if it's going to fall on deaf ears, well then it's going to be detrimental to what the plan's originally intent is.
Yeah, so we do engage and work with Kaingaora in an attempt to reach, a collective view on what development looks like. Obviously, they're in a bit of a changing space at the moment in terms of what their work programme looks like as well.
Because the other question is, well, how come it can be in my backyard and not theirs? Because it's been popped up all around the place in general residential areas, and then all of a sudden we're saying, well, you can't do it here. When, like I said before, the horse is almost bolted.
Yep, that is.
The nervous
we're
laughter
after
doesn't help.
plan review. we have a plan that doesn't reflect what currently people want to do and types of building styles, and that's why we're trying to update it at speed, but still carefully.
Yeah. At pace, but respectfully. Councillor Ria, thank you.
Bishop. So I already in the previous paper talked to my views on the importance of engagement, meaningful engagement. And so I'm not going to rehash any of that kōrero. I suppose just in regards to Kaiti and Ngāti Winione, just kind of broadening on some of the concerns that I sent through on the email this week. And I mean, Your Worship, you can attest to, we were at a meeting at Te Tairāwhiti on Tuesday, and they delivered their ideal plan of what Kaiti should look like, and that plan has been in development over the last 10 years. It's already had a lot of engagement from hapu and whānau. It has evolved through COVID, and it has evolved through the cyclone. So they really have ideas that are ready, that are well thought out, that have had lots of community engagement. So it's really important that we with them is prioritised in terms of solidifying some of the things within the Kaiti Masterplan. So that's what I'll say about that side of engagement. I support the use of mahi ka ora. I remember it coming up in another thing, the National Māori Housing Strategy to inform, but I do feel that it needs to be weighted against actual regional knowledge, including hapu and community feedback. That we can take suggestions from a regional glance, but we all know that at a national glance, but that doesn't always reflect exactly what's happening here in Tairāwhiti or Whakatane or Napier or wherever else. Last but not least, and you may get this through your engagement with Ngāti Winione, is that, for example, on page 309, it talks about cultural and historically significant sites in Kaiti that have been identified on the map. So there would be, in my view, an overlap between some of the waterways, and those should actually also be factored in. I mean, there are historical photos of Kopua Whakapata and how it was a large thriving river, and it's now been reduced to a drain. But it was a large thriving river that once went right through the community, and it was used for trade, and it was used as our highway. There were no roads, we used that river. And so that, I feel like there's examples of that in the Kaiti area where we need to kind of earmark this as a historically and culturally significant site. And so I'm just using Kopua Whakapata as an example. Kia ora, that's all I had to say.
Councillor Parata.
Sort of echoing some of the sentiments of Councillor Wharehinga. I'm grateful to be sitting here at this table at a time that we're talking about Kaiti and about the future of Kaiti and about our hopes and dreams for Kaiti. Knowing that over many years it has seen lots of different kinds of struggles. It's awesome to be sitting here having this deep dive on it. What I would like to see in papers going forward is, I understand that this is the policy document, and I understand it's got legal ramifications, it's got parameters. But what I would like to see for the purposes of the table perhaps is, what do we know about Kaiti? Do we know it? Do we know what that community looks like? Do we know what it feels like to live in Kaiti? Do we know what the community feels like? Josh raised his kids there. Aubrey is I'm resident. But what I would like to see is and even if it's an attachment, what do we know about Kaiti? How are we treating it? How are we seeing it? It doesn't need to be part of the policy, but it'll give us an idea of how this community is being captured. And then some of the decisions that we make that are around zoning will make more sense if we can see the narrative or the lens or the perspective of which it's being treated. So that was just one thing. Knowing that in my times in Kaiti, I have seen all manner of really beautiful things. You know, whānau, watching all of the kids get on the bus. All of the kids are our kids in Kaiti. And I think that that's a beautiful part of that community, that sense of these are all of our kids. And if there's trouble, it's all of our trouble. And, you know, like working together, and not everywhere in the world does that. There are places in Auckland you don't know anyone. Yeah. But in Te Tairāwhiti you know people, but in Kaiti,
different level.
You belong. You belong to Kaiti. This is our wāhi. We care for it and we look after it. So, yeah, that's just one point.
And also, a bouquet to our CEO was raised in Kaiti and lived there as well, and went to Kaiti Kindi, and so that comes through, hopefully through a lot of input from staff as well, knowing that, because I wasn't raised there, you weren't raised there, you know, so the people that really know, like Orbs and Josh and Nadine, hopefully can bring that and make it real. Yeah.
And then again, I can see a lot of work has gone into this, and I'm actually really appreciate the maps, and I can understand this is the first go at it, and that it will be developed. My only thing is that I hope what's going out to community is digestible, that they definitely have their own thoughts, but if it looks like this, they'll never be able to understand it. And that's not a criticism of their intelligence at all. But it's just the same thing that Councillor Older was saying, is how we package it will determine how they engage. And we will get more engagement from them if it is packaged in a way that they can understand. Yeah. But other than that, I'm really, I think it is going in the right direction. I don't need to repeat the things that we've said about meaningful engagement, because I know that that's been heard. And just echoing some of the things about having different types of housing with different needs. What I'm finding on social media, at least, is that there are a lot of young couples looking for places to stay, but they can't afford a 3-bedroom house. They don't make that much money. So having different types of housing for, you know, single parents, that kind of thing, it's exciting to think what our city might look like in 20 years. How many people might see themselves living here and thriving here, and I think this is the beginning of that mahi. So, yeah, just ngā mihi nui.
So that, very valuable. Yep, Councillor Ria, that doesn't need to be tiny. It can be big.
I just want to add on to something that Councillor Parata talked about, and it's something that I was brought up knowing about Kaiti. Kaiti was established out of displacement and homelessness. That's how Kaiti was established. So Te Tairāwhiti marae was at where the mobile is, and then we got moved off the mobile and we were over by the fisheries, and then once it all got taken over to do port business, we were essentially displaced within the city of Gisborne. We had nowhere to go, so a lot of the people who would work in town were then drifting across the river into the town and sleeping under shop windows. And that got, you know, the shopkeepers didn't like that. So the council of the time made a law that after 6 o'clock at night, everyone who was homeless had to be out of the city centre. So they all got pushed out, all the homeless, the first example of homelessness in Gisborne, they all got pushed out and they started tent city on Onepoto Beach in Kaiti. They took up residence along the beach. They used the sand to bury their food and they used it as a fridge, and they took up residence there. Apira Ngata came in and requested that we build Te Poho Rawiri. Te Poho Rawiri was to host and look after displaced whānau, not just of Ngāti Onione, but of the many that were coming down from the coast in order to work and thrive in town. So that is a little bit of like a tiny little juicy nugget of the history of Kaiti. And with that in mind, I just really want to emphasise everything that Rawunia can say. So Josh and I have been like Kaiti Masterplan, but it is awesome to get to a space where you can start really visualising the possibilities moving forward, considering where we know now the origins of Kaiti have come from. Kia ora.
Thank you. Any other more questions or feedback? And as always, if you have other feedback or thoughts, please make sure you email it through to these guys, hopefully within 24 to 48 hours of a meeting, because otherwise you're going to miss the bus. Councillor Foster.
I've just got a question for Orbs. How come Kaiti Beach became Kaiti Beach when it was Oripoto?
Oripoto?
I know it's been Oripoto, but why isn't it still Oripoto and it's Kaiti Beach?
It's actually, Kaiti is named after Puhi Kaiti, so the original long name is Puhi Kaiti, and that comes from a story from the Horota Waka, which is a longer conversation, Larry, that you and I can have at another point. But
moved by Councillor Wharehinga, seconded by Councillor Ria. All in favour? Aye. Carry. That's for a cup of tea, councillors.
Right.
All good, but thank you for asking the question. Thank you for that work as well, ongoing work. I'm going to take us all, we're going to swap our stuff, Yannick. We're going to swap these now, eh? Is it whether we're going to do the freshwater update first? Is that the swapsies that was indicated?
If you want,
yes.
That would be...
So we're going to go to page 370 first, which is the Freshwater Programme update, and then we are going to move into the Regional Freshwater Plan. So thank you, Yannick. So everyone, page 370, and then we will, after we've moved that and just had that, we'll go to the maps.
Thank you, Your Worship. I won't dwell on the report per se. I will take it as read, but what I did want to do was take an opportunity to provide a bit of an overview and I guess segue into the activities in the Beds of Rivers and Lakes chapter. So I'm going to start at the end of this report actually by saying we've got quite a year ahead of us.
Yep.
And it's a bit of an elephant that we need to break down in terms of our freshwater program work. And broadly, where we're sitting at the moment is that we're beginning to taper off the technical work. Our timeframes are such that we need to move through that technical work, have the evidence base to begin informing the policy development. We're probably mid-stride through engagement. Some engagement is tapering off, some is starting. But generally, we're looking to begin our focus on the policy response to our regional freshwater plan as well as our second catchment plans. We're moving into that space. So we have a great opportunity to begin socialising this forum with the work that we're doing and what our policy will begin to look like, both from a regional freshwater plan and catchment plan perspective, but also what that looks like as a whole package. So what we're looking at this year is really to begin the conversation around moving towards a consolidated freshwater package, hopefully by the end of this year. So the starting point really for us is around the regional freshwater plan. As you know, there are 4 key sections there that we have to navigate and traverse. And the starting point for us is the activities in the Beds of Lakes and Rivers section. So really that's all I wanted to say with regards to the freshwater update, is just to provide that kind of context setting. One of the other things that we need to be aware of as we progress is that while we have started looking at the regional freshwater plan from a 4-section perspective,
as we begin to move forwards, we're going to have to reframe that so it's consistent with the national planning standards. So this is some of the work that we're doing as well, is, okay, what does that look like? Now, we've reviewed the 4 sections of our existing regional freshwater plan as they are. We've engaged our freshwater advisory groups on those 4 sections as well. We've had feedback from it. So the next steps are for us to socialise what those 4 sections look like, how we've thought about those 4 sections, and then begin to translate them into a new framework that is consistent with those planning standards. So that is a conversation to come. But that's all I will say just in terms of that broader update. That's, we've got heaps of work on. We are beginning to provide some introductory, some kind of broader introductions and sort of socialising some of the concepts around each of those 4 sections, and we're beginning to shape up our collection plans to bring to the table as well. So I will just leave it there. Happy to open the floor up for any pātai around that regional freshwater.
Councillor Ria.
No questions. Thank you for the report, Freshwater Programme update. I'd like to move.
Councillor Parata.
I always struggle in these meetings because I feel like I know the least about about resource management. So my questions always tend to be the human kind. So if that's okay.
That's exactly why you're at the table.
I want to know about Waipawa specifically. Knowing that it's a Tupuna river but has caused flooding in the past. I just want to understand, like, how does this resource management mahi support and or protect or hinder the protection of the people? Can you explain that for me? Because I can't tell from this document.
In a nutshell, through your worship, the TRMP, I think, as a whole, I mean, when you're looking at the protection of our communities from natural hazards, such as flooding, which is huge, obviously there's an intersection there with our rules around flood hazard overlays, so how we manage risk, but also, more importantly, about how we manage infrastructure. So we know that there's a massive infrastructure investment in the Waipawa in respect of the flood control scheme. And so that's an activity that we need to be mindful of as well. So there's an intersection in our TRMP that manages the activities around flood management, because the activity can affect the values that we've identified within the Waipawa River itself. So there's that. But it's an enabling, the TRMP is effectively an enabling mechanism to allow our communities to be protected as well as protecting in-stream values.
I was supposed to put it simply, I guess the resource management plan is a chance for you as a committee and then the council to decide the balance between what activities it wants to enable or make an easy consented pathway or not receive a resource consent, and then that balance between allowing those but also realising that those activities can affect values. Yeah. And where do you put that balance for particular activities like flood protection? Do you put it all towards protection of people and say, well, in this case, we just have to let these values go because people are most important? Or do you have somewhere in between, or do you go all out on protecting the values of the waterway, whatever they may be, cultural, environmental, economic, for other reasons? So it's really hard and really important.
No, I think it is really hard and really important, which is why I think having these discussions and having these debates are really important. Because if you ask me, my answer will be whānau. But if you ask all, people say why. But see, that's sort of my point is how do our people, how do our region, how are they experiencing these conversations around resource management? And I understand the importance of it, particularly from a cultural perspective of why being, really our be all end all. And so the most important life source that we have as people in this region is our most important resource, and I do understand that. But I also understand, or not understand perhaps, how communities might feel they're not a priority or not enough of a priority. And I just don't know if this conversation is appropriate for this, but I don't know where else to say it.
That's perfect. This is the feedback table.
Yeah, as where do we draw the line? Where do we as council determine, like what Joe said, what can and should be easy to do, and what definitely should we make extra hard? I don't need an answer of that. I just suppose just a question I've been thinking about. And by Yannick is an answer.
Maybe further to that, and if I step back and consider some of the work that we're doing in the catchment planning space, it's the perfect question actually that you raised, because what we are considering, and further to Ms. Wallace, for Karo, is we have moved through 150 years of settlement effects from land clearance, that we are having conversations with tangata whenua and our communities about how do we redesign or recalibrate the catchment to address all of the issues that have gone through the past. What's the balance look like? And coming back to the Tairāwhiti flats, for example, where flooding is an historic issue, it's the same question that we're posing, is what's the balance look like? And what you find when you look at the whakapapa of the mahi is that it sheets home to the wider catchment and how land use has changed over time as well. So it's all inclusive. It's not a simple answer, but it's a really, really pertinent question to ask when we're travelling through this, because we are putting in place a regulatory framework to manage for an outcome. And so it's really about understanding what outcomes we want for the trial, but also for our hapuri as well. I think it's a very good question.
Yeah, you can add.
I think too that the added, I don't know if it's a pressure but it definitely meaning you have to look at it from a different lens, is legislation and funding. And so take the Waipawa for an example. So we've seen information, we've seen climate change experts come in front of us and say actually one of the best mitigations would be to widen the stock bank, to give the awa room to breathe. After the cyclone hit, we were only given funding to reinforce current stock banks. So even though we know it's a good idea to widen the breathing space for the awa and to extend the stock banks out further so that it can breathe and ebb and flow as it should naturally do, it just wasn't possible in the emergency of the cyclone and then the types of funding we got, and that often frustrated me until I got it, like, oh, we can't actually do it because, and so there's areas where the stock bank doesn't exist that might now be susceptible to flooding because now we've reinforced every other part of the stock bank, but there's no money and there's no fund available to be able to reinforce areas that didn't have a stock bank. So there's all of those considerations too, like, yeah, I'll pick the awa. I'll pick the awa, but I would definitely, not want the awa to keep alive or anything that happened to Tikaraka to happen in any other community ever again if we were to experience a natural disaster.
Sarah.
I just wanted to round back to a previous comment I made, probably on the wrong paper, but related to how you're thinking about national direction and reflecting it through your work. So I couldn't help but notice in this paper, the current TRMP seems to does take an enabling activities while avoiding effects approach, which I also couldn't help but notice is the absolute inverse of the hierarchy of obligations under Te Mana o Te Wai and the NPS National Policy Statement for Freshwater Management. It puts GDC in a really difficult position because your community understands the framework that's currently in place, the framework that's at this stage directing from a national level is the opposite, and you're in a planning process, and that national framework's likely to change, the best opportunity for the community is to get really clear on the values and outcomes you want. And that's where the workshop later on is going to be helpful, asking about the values that should be provided for the outcomes. But it would be helpful to have that clear line of sight between national policy statement provisions, the national objectives framework, Te Mana o Te Wai, and whatever approach you're wanting to take through your freshwater management planning, so that if and when it changes, you know the work that you've done and how it relates to it, and you can change it to reflect the community's values and outcomes. Because I didn't see a clear sort of intervention logic between the national policy statement as it currently stands. And you're not alone. I'm sitting on Greater Wellington's Plan Change 1 panel, and they're the only council in the country that is embedding the NPSFM 2020 in planning provisions. And it's really uncertain for them as well. Published on their website is all their legal advice and the Chief Executive's opening comments, acknowledging the uncertainty, acknowledging the potential for change. But at this stage, carrying on. So you're doing the right thing. Just be aware. Yeah.
Councillor Foster.
Thank you. We've got 7 different catchments and 7 different catchment groups. I'm just interested to find out what, the skill level of all the different catchment groups. I mean, are you really comfortable with the community's response for the call to belong to a catchment group? How have you managed that all? Because they're all different catchments, but there must be some consistency over the whole lot. And some other areas that are totally got their own little environment that is totally different to anywhere else. So just quite interested in how you're managing all that.
Through you, Worship, as best as we can, Councillor Foster. But what we found is each of those advisory groups, because they are made up of representatives from the catchment or have a very strong tie to the catchments themselves, offering quite a significant contribution to the mahi itself. Now, the consistency that we're drawing on for each of those advisory groups is actually the National Objectives Framework, which is the engine room, and actually speaks to several comments that have been made by members in previous meetings, including Councillor Wharehinga, around the flax roots approach to planning, which is where each of those representatives draw upon their own experience and inform the process. And so really we're talking about what are the things that are important, what are our challenges, what's the state of the environment, and where do we need to get to? All of which are very easy conversations to have with our advisory group members. So in each of the catchments, we've found that dialogue to be extremely productive. And of course, it's not the only engagement that we do as well. We reach out to iwi and hapu also, where they express an interest. We engage where appropriate, and community hui as well. And normally with catchment planning, we start with a community hui. We socialise the advisory group, get that going, and then we come back to the community, at least on 1 or 2 occasions. So that's how it all works, and generally the information that we're getting back is very, very rich.
So when like I've been to a couple of community huis, and it's been really informative actually to see where the community's desires and anguishes. But when will you see the final kind of meetings with the community with your final plans? How long down the track is that going to be? I mean, I know there's been a halt from the government for Te Mana by the end of the year. So, I'm not expecting anything this year, but I mean, we're looking at everything to be kind of finalised in 26, or
Through you, Your Worship, we'll be looking to wrap up our freshwater package if all of our engagement goes to plan and all of our technical work goes to plan. Big dependencies there, by the end of this year. So the intention is that we can actually bring the full package to you in December. Now, obviously that's contingent on a whole bunch of factors, and the trade winds are going our way, but effectively that's what we're aiming for. It's really important that this forum is able to get across all of the work that we're doing and understanding where it comes from. So particularly for the regional freshwater plan, it's global, it ranges across the region, and there's some technical aspects there that we just need to break down and get across. But end of the year, Councillor, and then that gives us an opportunity to socialise, have some conversations following the elections about key topics. We know water quantity is going to be a critical conversation piece. Some aspects of discharges as well. You know, that's a huge matter for us, particularly as it relates to sediment. And that'll ease us into 2026. We're on target for notifying mid-2026 if everything goes well and the uncertainties reveal themselves. But it does also come back to what Councillor Wharehinga says, is that the conversations are driven from the flax roots up. And that's where the richness, that's where the meaning and the direction that we're taking comes from.
Yeah. A comment actually probably, and declared interest that I am a member of the Tairāwhiti catchment group, and that's progressing at speed with funding, or with quite money to fund our own research for our own catchment. I think as a result of feeling let down by the council, probably historically, we feel we have to take charge of our own catchment. It's well represented from landholders and iwi in the catchment, and I think we've got aspirations to look to manage our own area in the future, obviously with the help and coordination with council. I'll take that hat off.
Thank you for that. Moved by myself. Moved by Councillor Ria, seconded by myself. All in favour? Contrary carried. So now we're going to hop back to 317 for the Regional Freshwater Plan, activities in beds of rivers and lakes. Thank you.
Thank you, Your Worship. Just a couple of words from me, and then I'll hand it on to far more experienced hands. As I mentioned, we've got 4 sections of the Regional Freshwater Plan. What we're doing is we're trying to break this elephant up into bite-sized pieces for conversations across this year. Starting with perhaps the less contentious, well, perhaps not, in the activities in the beds of rivers and lakes. Now, the broad intention is that we've got 4 sections. We want to have a couple of cuts at it. So really the first cut for this section is really the conversation, what is it all about, what does it involve? This is what we've engaged the freshwater advisory groups on, and this is the feedback, with the intention to set us up for a second conversation around the same section, where we begin to talk about what's the direction of travel for our policy, so we can really get some surface area to this particular part of the plan, get some really, really good input and feedback from yourself so we can take that forward and begin to work on the policy itself. So what I will do is I will hand over to one of the consultants that we've been working with, who's in our freshwater team, Adele Dawson. She works for Insight, is well across this, and is just a fantastic team member to boot. So I will hand it over to Adele, if that's okay, Your Worship.
Right, thank you, Adele. Thank you for joining us today. The floor is yours.
Thank you. Before I start, can you hear me, see me? We're all good?
We can hear.
Excellent. Yeah, kia ora everyone. As Yannick said, my name's Adele Dawson. I work for a consultancy called Insight, and we're based in Christchurch, but I actually live in Whakatū, Nelson, and have really enjoyed coming up to Tairāwhiti to get to know the region. So yes, I've been working with the freshwater team to review the TRMP section on activities in the beds of lakes and rivers, and you've got a report which summarises a review that we've undertaken in the past about 2 years. and comes up with some issues with the different parts of that plan, which we look to address in the new freshwater plan moving forward. I guess just to highlight what we did in undertaking that review, we looked at the latest monitoring results from Council, and for this topic in particular, the important things were water quality and minimum bed level monitoring that's occurred across the region. As you're all aware, there's been a raft of national direction that has come out in the last sort of 5 to 10 years since the TRMP or the Freshwater Plan was notified back in 2015. And we've also considered, I guess, current planning practices and the technical work that the team have been working on across the science team and sort of nationally. And of course, the engagement with the Freshwater Advisory Group. And we've also caught up with compliance and consents teams internally to understand how implementation of the Freshwater Plan has, I guess, been of benefit, and also the challenges that they've seen through implementing the provisions to date. And ultimately, the review has found that for the activities and beds part in particular, generally the activities that occur within the region are addressed by the plan, but the national direction that's come in has meant that there's a lot of misalignment and, I guess, inconsistency, particularly in terms of giving effect to the MPSFM, to Mana o Te Wai, and a few other specific parts of that national legislation. And there's the stock exclusion regulations, national environmental standards for freshwater, there's some damming regulations that have all come out, which has just basically meant that for plan users and people trying to actually understand what they need to do on the ground, it's a bit confusing. So ideally, we're going to address those gaps and limitations. And the other parts of the review, I guess, highlight that there are some things missing or some aspects that could benefit being included in the new freshwater plan, particularly around flood management, given events of the last couple of years, and some feedback from staff internally around challenges with some of the roles, in particular gravel management. So that's sort of, I guess, sort of the high level messages that there are a bunch of changes coming through, nothing, I guess, probably too significant, but certainly some things to address as we move forward.
Thank you for that, Adele. The floor is open. Sarah, thank you.
Thanks, Adele. For you, Your Worship, I thought I'll attempt sort of plain English explanation of the change in national direction.
Awesome.
So
we are all ears.
The current TRMP is about enabling activities that support people and communities to go about their daily lives while avoiding wrecking the environment. The current national policy statement, freshwater management, throws that on its head. So it prioritises the health and well-being, the health and well-being of water bodies, of the wai, the water. That is the primary fundamental thing of importance, not risk of flooding and damage to property and loss of human life, the health of the water. And then secondary to that is essential water, like drinking water supplies. And the final aspect of importance is enabling people and communities to provide for their everyday life. So we've got basically a national framework that when the TRMP was set, enabling people and communities and all their livelihoods first. We've now got national direction that says the water is the most important thing, but that's been put on hold because the government's reviewing it, and you'll need to keep an ear to the ground to see what's coming. But it's in that context that all this work is being done. And I think it would be helpful for the community to understand the difference. Basically, it used to be the more important thing, you people and communities. At the moment, the why is the most important thing. We're doing this work to figure out what's important to us as a community, and it's going to have to shoehorn in to another national framework.
Thank you for that. It's always good to describe stuff like that. It's really good. Thank you for that. Any other questions? Councillor Albert, are you waving at me, or are you just sitting, or are you just saying hello, how are you?
I'm just wondering where to start.
All good.
Thank you for the report, Yannick, and others. So we've got to this point, and there's lots of references to the bricks that have foundations of this report at its point. And some of those bricks I have disagreed with. Parts of them have been laid. I've been outvoted, and I accept that. But I just would like to go back and bring up some points on those bricks. And if you want to go to page 360.68, Puipuia Limited completed a mana to wire review of the regional freshwater Waipawa catchment plans. The report outlined a series of recommendations should they be adopted.
What page are you, Councillor Alder? Can you just...
I am on page 360.68.
It's not part...
It's the treaty
It's not part of this paper.
Yes.
Because this paper is...
the one,
Yeah, so that's not part of this paper, Councillor.
Well, sorry, we jumped around so much. I thought we were on freshwater.
So this, but that paper stops at page 340.
Oh.
So maybe save your question up for our second. So the next one is about the Tairāwhiti research, the general update, the problem.
Okay, sorry.
No worries.
Okay, so this part, I have got a question in this part, I think.
No rush.
I'm back to it.
We've got more than enough time.
358 is also on the next page? Yeah.
Yes.
Okay.
So we're just warming up.
Yes.
Any more questions in regards to this? Councillor Ria.
Page 323, can you please define in-stream values? Is that habitat as well as taonga fish species? What is in-stream values?
I could probably answer that question, Your Worship. In-stream values are those values that rely on the water itself. So that's in contrast to abstracted values, such as irrigation. So swimming would be an in-stream value, anything which relies on the health and promoting of the water itself.
Cool, I understand that perfectly, I just didn't know the English word for it.
All good.
Page 325, gravel extraction, talks specifically about removal of gravel for management purposes. Is there like a mitigation or like when the gravel is extracted, is it repurposed or is it stored, or what happens when you remove gravel that isn't used for a purpose of like roading or infrastructure? Because that specific area talked about that it was actually for the hours, for the benefit of the awa, or for a community that's further down, that gravel might be extracted from that part of the river. But I was wondering that when it is, like, is it repurposed? Because there's so many rivers that are like covered in silt that could do with that gravel, or do with that gravel and re-rocking and beds, river beds and things like that. So I was just wondering what happens with that gravel that gets taken out because it's causing some sort of harm down the river.
Adele, would you like to speak to that question?
I guess I'm not 100% familiar with the gravel operations occurring across the region, but I could say that gravel extractions often occurring near infrastructure because of access, because those operators need to be able to get machinery and the like into the river. And so for flood management purposes, it's often related to maintaining a bridge or something like that. So if they're removing material that has built up near a bridge, I guess it's to protect that structural integrity. And I would say that because of the gravel operators' commercial use of that, there's probably fewer situations where it's just taken for a primarily flood management purpose. I think it's normally a dual purpose.
Okay, thank you. And I didn't see any mention of operational work on riparian margins other than C6.4 in the TRMP, and we don't have a copy yet of that in this. But I just wanted to make note around the riparian margins, because it's kind of like, yeah, it sits in freshwater, but it's also a part of the riparian strip. is the banks, and so it's the considerations for dewatering when when a river has to be graded out or widened or something like that. Like what are the policies or regulations in place for dewatering that land that is graded up? What is the optimal gradient measurements? Because I have seen like some are quite steep, and like, do we know how having, after you send a digger in there and the gradient is steep, is that to a detriment of all the fish and the tuna that live in there? And so there's just some, mitigating long-term effects on the surrounding habitats and processes in regards to taonga, safety of fish species and invertebrates when riparian work is being done, especially with commercial diggers and things like that. So I'd like to see those things, but I wasn't sure, do they fit in freshwater or do they fit in riparian margin? Because they're over there, but they have a huge effect on what happens down there. And then the last thing is that these feedback boxes in the blue, were those from Poipoia?
You're talking about the questions, these ones?
So on page 331, there's a box of bullet points. So are those the recommendations from Poipoia? They're given at every point after every...
Through you, Your Worship, they're just really to break the report up and to provide a kind of touch point for consideration.
Okay, cool. Yeah. No, that's great to hear. I really like those extra considerations there in those text boxes, whether they came from Poipoia or the staff, or whether it's been a
staff talking with the advisory
group, working together to get
engagement. So that's what the current direction is looking like. So if there is anything in any of those boxes that looks like you really don't like, now is a good time to say.
I did like those, and I thought that they just kind of helped to fine-tune the information that came before it. So,
am I the only one that thought that the recommendation was weird?
Yes.
Page 3.
Yeah, it is.
Request that the questions in attachment 1 are read in preparation for discussion on the day of the meeting.
I don't think that was
what I signed off on. No, that is not. Changed. I thought that was the printing devil that creeped in there. So should we say accept the report? What are the correct recommendation that you?
I think accepts the report and also provides any feedback on the content, and particularly those blue boxes.
So the word is accept the report and provide feedback.
I've got a question.
Cool. You're not passing it. I was just going back to, so Councillor Parata and then Councillor Alder and then Councillor Ria. There's no rush, people.
Oh, was it me first? Sorry. This extraction of gravel from the rivers, I was approached by a Patatai farmer who's been prosecuted for extracting gravel, and yet at the same time we're spending millions on building beside that. So the sooner we get some good direction there, I think is really good. Page 327, and we're talking about the width of a stream as being a metre. Is there a definite rule around what a metre stream is? It's very arbitrary. And if we're going to set a rule on a metre stream, there needs to be a known fixed ruler. And then just one other comment about, in this case it's quoted as stock access on 48 and Te Mana o Te Wai. Again, with Te Mana o Te Wai, if we're going to introduce it as a ruler, it needs to be an understandable ruler. It can't be an arbitrary rule. That's my comments. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Alder. Any comment there or just noting down?
Just noting
down. Thank you. We had Councillor Parata and then we had Councillor Ria. Thank you.
No, I was just seconding it.
Seconding it. All good. Councillor Ria, did you have another comment?
Just on Councillor Alder's concern in regards to Te Mana o Te Wai, I think it would be really great for us to get, we've had many conversations about Te Mana o Te Wai. It's been unpacked in lots and lots of different ways, but I think too is an area that we haven't really talked about is about Te Manawa Te Wai and the benefits to the economy and how it can be used by our farmers and our businesses and our, you know, we hear so many times how Te Manawa Te Wai is good for Māori, good for the environment, good for local communities, but I think there's a huge untapped area, which I was fortunate to sit in a hui where they actually talked about the huge economic benefits of landowners, farm owners, Māori working together and how it can be economically beneficial. And I think that's a part of the script that we actually haven't heard at the council table, and I think that helps to alleviate some concerns too around Te Manawa Te Wai when you can see it painted in a light that is beneficial for all parties, and I think that's really important for understanding.
Support that. Any other questions or queries in regards to this paper? Moved by Councillor Parata, seconded by Councillor Ria. All in favour? Okay, so now Councillor Alder, the floor is yours, my friend. This is an update, so just to clarify, we're on page 341, and this is our last paper. And so this is just our general update
on all the work
of the huge capital letter H, UGE piece of work we are tackling bit by bit. So thank you for this very extensive update, and I'm going to leave it questions. Councillor Alder, now is your time, the questions you started earlier. Thank you.
So I was going to kick off on page 360.
Excuse me.
Point 72. So what I was saying is this report's got to where we are with these blocks that we've laid down, and these are referenced through to meetings that we've previously held. And one of these key blocks, if you like, is Ki Uta Ki Tai, which was all agreed upon. And in that meeting, where Ki Uta Ki Tai was being assessed, it had pros and cons. It had about 7 pros put against it. And the comment on the cons was priorities and trade-offs not identified. So, to my way of thinking, that the cons weren't fully analysed at that stage. And yet, this is now a bit of a foundational block in what we're building beyond. So, that's my first point. Second point is on 381. And I can't find my notes. So, Puipoi are limited, and their investigation and influence into the Waipoa catchment and the Te Manawa Te Wai and again, Puipoi Limited, when you go back to the meeting where this was used as a foundation, 24-229, they admit that they had no consultation with the iwi in producing that report. And so again, we have a foundation here which is a consultancy group that have come up with recommendations that we're using, and there was no consultation in that. And I guess this also backs up some of the earlier discussion that, you know, are we really consulting properly with iwi?
Good question, Councillor Alder. Charlotte?
Just in relation to the Puipoi consultancy report, the way it's viewed as a piece of technical advice and evidence as opposed to
a summary of engagement or a piece of work. So similar, we do that a lot. For example, around many examples of scientific style technical evidence reports that you've heard about around minimum flows, biodiversity. So that in terms of that report and your question around that is where it sits in our evidence base and our technical pieces of work. And that's not unusual, and many councils also get similar advice through those types of consultancies with those specialties.
And back to your comment about priorities and trade-offs not identified. Whilst they may not be identified in the concept of ki utu ki tai, which is all about interconnectedness and how you do one thing in one place affects somewhere else, as part of developing the new TRMP, that is what you need to be conscious of at every step in the process. If I'm making this decision here, what are the priorities and trade-offs that relate to that decision? And that's then all documented in that Section 32 report that the commissioners refer to, which looks at the cost and benefits of the plan change as a whole. So it's not that that won't be considered and isn't important, it's just that you're not deciding it up front in the ki utu ki tai concept. It's something that you'll work through as you agree or don't to draft plan provisions that are put in front of you as a committee.
I'm just also going to ask Jean for a comment. I see his hand is up.
Through you, Your Worship, just to add to Charlotte's kōrero, the actual journey with Poi Poi A was worked through with the iwi technical trial members of the time as well, and actually we responded to a request that they made to us to have an overview of our current catchment plan and where the alignment or not was with the MPSFM and Te Mana o Te Wai. So just sort of adding that to the picture as well.
Yeah, I just feel we should communicate with our community early and then consult and spend money on consultants later, is my opinion, and I know I'm crossing a line there. But my last point is, again, talking to what Sarah brought up earlier, and it's point 57 on page 358, and that is that the coalition government, there is a shift from focusing on environmental protection to prioritising economic development and commercial activity. I think that's a little bit harsh, and I'd like to think that the reason that they're looking for a more balanced approach has had a lot to do with some of the perhaps not fully scientific, measurable methods that were going to be applied under Te Mana o Te Wai.
Thank you for that opinion. Yeah, because you can look at it from anyone here can have a 100% correct what you said, but I might have a slightly different view. Someone depending where you sit on a political spectrum or economic spectrum or whatever. But I acknowledge
as council here, we have made a definite statement.
Well, we said there may be a shift in focus. I don't think we've expanded on the reasons for that shift in focus.
And it's true to say there will be a shift in focus.
Yeah.
Yeah. But thank you for that.
A more balanced approach.
Yeah. In your opinion. Just saying. Did I miss someone? Josh and then Aubrey. Oh, no. Andy.
Yeah, mine's not.
Josh. Andy, because I've missed you quite a bit. You've been waving at me for quite some time.
That's all right. Mine's not contextual, so
okay. So let's finish
if
that.
everyone's contextual, they can go first.
Yeah, I'm one.
Okay. Then you, and then Andy wave at. Oh, there's everyone now. Andy, number 5. All good. Thank you, team. Let's go.
I'm very supportive of the paper as written. It's very informative in regards to the mahi that's been done up to date, and it does bring to it's a noting report, right? So it's an informative report about the things that you guys have done. So thank you for providing that information. I think that the staff advice and the opinion in regards to the changing landscape, political landscape, is 100% accurate. There is going to be a shift. The one thing that I do want to push back on, though, is that Te Mana o Te Wai is scientific. It is backed by science. Just because that science doesn't come from a Western sphere, it doesn't mean that it's less scientific. There are multiple other cultures in this world that have their own sciences and their own ways to develop their own science. So I think that Te Mano, actually, I don't, it's not that I think that, I academically know that as someone that has his masters, as someone that has studied at a higher level, that Te Mano o Te Wai has academic rigour, both in the Te Ao Māori space and also in the Western University space. So yes, it is science, academically and informatively speaking, not just my opinion. So just wanted to put that on the record. Thank you. Aubrey.
Kia ora. Thank you, Your Worship. So I've been chomping at the bit to get to this, and I'm going to apologise up front because I wasn't here at the last workshop when this actually got brought down. I was at a Te Maruratahui, so I missed out on this. So I might repeat some things. I know there was a really good discussion, robust discussion around this document, and I suppose it's just to go back on why the template of Ki Uta Ki Tai was chosen in the first place. You know, I did a quick Google search because I read this and I read the first 20 pages and I felt really underwhelmed. I felt really underwhelmed by the paper. And I felt like, and I think in my mind that somebody from outside of the district wrote this, because you can take every iwi name out of this document and put any iwi name in and it will be relevant in any rohe across New Zealand. There's no Tairāwhiti centric, nothing in there, nothing at all. So I did a quick Google search and the first hit was Environment Canterbury. Land and water form a complex interconnected environment which must be sustainably managed in a holistic way. That is not captured in this. Sustainable seas, national science. Ki Uta Ki Tai is the Te Ao Māori concept that more historically encompasses and appreciates the interconnectedness of all parts of the system. Not reflected in this document. I can go on, but that was just the first page of Google searches that I came up with when I entered it into the search. One of the best examples of Ki Uta Ki Tai templates is, of course, the Te Tangi a Te Taura, Ngai Tahu ki Murihiku Natural Resource and Environmental Iwi Management Plan, which is endorsed by the Southland District Council and the Queenstown Lakes District Council. And it is filed under Environment Canterbury Online, if you want to go on and have a look at it. Effective Ki Uta Ki Tai documents are traditionally reflective of people and place, and we say that so many times at this table that it should be reflective of people and place. Incorporating excerpts of historical kōrero, proverbs, karakia, motiatia waiata, and stories that pertain to Te Tairāwhiti and Turanganui Akiwa. None of that is reflected in this. Everything written in Te Reo Māori is a really generic Māori-dim, Māori across the entire country relative. There's nothing specific about it. Not Tairāwhiti centric, doesn't have a Tairāwhiti lens used to reflect things in the document. For example, page 210 refers to the creation story of Rangi and Papa. We all know the creation story of Rangi and Papa. Do we all know the relativity of Maui to Te Tairāwhiti? We've all heard stories of Maui. We've all heard stories of Maui the ancestor. What we might not know is that after he fished up the North Island, his waka nukutai memeha was then left petrified on Hikurangi Maunga in the river and in the roto that is on top of the maunga called Hine Takawhiti. That is a story that our people can relate to and get behind. That story of Maui. This story of Ranginui, a very important creation story, but not rohe relevant. So you can see all my post-its, like I'm not gonna pick apart every single page and go over because the essence of it is not reflective of Te Tairāwhiti, it is not Tairāwhiti centric. I already said it once today, this is not our rohe and our people reflected in a document. Kia ora.
Through you, Worship, just to clarify, what you're reading there is the existing TRMP, so that's the operative,
old one.
current plan. So thank you for endorsing the fact that it needs to change.
I've viewed some of the...
And we are, the new regional policy statement is still very, very, very early days, so I would take anything you have seen in that regard with a bushel, maybe a truckload of salt, because it will
Shall I send you an email, then, Jo?
Yes, and if you have feedback on the current TRMP or those very early working drafts, send them through.
Absolutely.
Yeah, because we've still got quite a way to go in terms of framing that up.
Yes, I did see, I have seen a little bit of chatter around the up and coming resource management plan, and I'm super scared that if an outside contractor is doing it for us, it's going to look like this.
I have those fears too. We all have those fears, so we're all pushing in the right direction. Not quite there yet, but work in progress.
Okay.
My turn.
Go. Oh, did someone put a hand up at the back? Charlotte just not.
Let me back here. Just in terms of the Tangata Whenua chapter, which is the one you were referencing around page 210, that's just so that you're aware that's been done in-house. The RPS chapter around Tangata Whenua, just so you know, that's not been done by a consultant. We're doing it ourselves in-house. And we've been working with iwi around, should I say a blank page approach to what they would like it to look like and protected voice in that space too. So it will look very different from the current one is probably my point.
And yeah, all that's been circulated externally is the current Untitled Chapter.
Yes. Yeah.
That's shocking.
Yes.
Shocking.
Councillor Tairāwhiti.
I get concerned when we say things like Tangata Whenua chapter.
That's the...
No, but what I would say though is that
yes, it's not.
Yeah, is that for the Gisborne District Council and for the purposes of this mahi, it's not that I think we would, but we're not going to use Māori, our whakapapa, our story and our history tokenistically. We're not going to use it to prove, you know, we're not going to put a whakatauki over something that didn't have the true and genuine influence or perspective of our iwi partners or our, you know, reflective of our region. Part of this is about how we weave ourselves and our culture and our identities. I don't want it actually just to be about Māori. I don't want us to be sitting in this room separating Māori from non-Māori. It's about what is it to be in Te Tairāwhiti? Like, how do you identify us, our togetherness here in Te Tairāwhiti? We have a part to play in that, but, you know, we all do. We all make up this place. And I think that's the point that Orbs is really trying to make, and we tried to make earlier, is with what lens are we seeing ourselves? Like, what does it mean to us? How do we see ourselves? How do we see ourselves here in Te Tairāwhiti? How do we see ourselves in Uawa? How do we see ourselves in Te Karakia? How do we see ourselves? And yeah, legislation says we have to write it a certain way, but we should all be able to to feel and understand that this mahi that we're doing affects the lives that we live and the way we live it. There were just a couple of points that came up before. I can see you waving, Charlotte. It'll be all. Oh, that's all right. I'll just keep my hand up so you can see me.
Good. I can see you. I've got eyes all around. I should really have tentacles like that.
I think we have so many conversations at this table about various frameworks that have Māori names, and I understand the fear that comes with that, the discomfort that comes with that when you don't see yourself in the name of the framework. I can understand that that's a challenging space to be in, to come from, to feel like maybe you're not a part of it, maybe it doesn't serve you, but never have I read a framework that particularly we endorse in Te Tairāwhiti that doesn't think about us all as people. It doesn't make life better for some Māori and worse for, you know, non-Māori. It's not the way that these frameworks work, so I know it's challenging, and I know sometimes the questions are around, you know, feeling that way, and I don't disregard that. I acknowledge that, you know, we're having these questions and they're robust. Te mana o te wai, I know it has words like Māori, like how do you measure Māori, and I get that. That's a conversation we have at the table, I think. You know, we have it in wānanga. How do you measure Māori? How do you identify Māori? But, so I just really wanted to acknowledge that I don't disregard your questions and your concerns, but yeah, it does have an academic merit. It is Indigenous knowledge. It does sound different to you. It doesn't discredit it, and it doesn't discredit your perspective or feelings, but it also, you're not sitting outside of it. As non-Māori, you're not sitting outside of the framework. Your well-being, your thoughts, your whakaaro, the well-being of the water is for us all. You're inside it, not sitting on the outside of it. That was my only thing I wanted to feed in.
I was just going to speak to your first point at the start, and the world of resource management planning and national planning standards frames. I just wanted to reassure you that the Tangata Whenua chapter is not the box where all things Tangata Whenua will live. We do still need. I know it sometimes feels a little bit like that when you see the skeleton, but that's not the intent that we've been going into when we've been writing. And I understand some of the drafts that you've seen today. We've not nailed it yet, but we're working. Those are some of the bits that we're doing a lot of hard work on at the moment with our treaty partners to make sure that it's not generic and it is really Tairāwhiti specific. So just wanted to reiterate that, and that is the good stuff to come.
I did just have one more thing. I know so many times at this table, not just at this particular table, but at all our tables, we talk about procurement and about local procurement. And these spaces in particular, it's really important where we can engage the experts from Te Tairāwhiti. It's important that we engage them and that we give them space to feed in, feed early, participate, because the product that will come back to the table will be filled with energy and we'll be able to feel that, read it, because those that are from home will work harder. They always do. I stand by that.
I'll just, tēnā koe i rā whakaaro, Councillor Parata. I'm interested to know ko wai i rā unicorns. If we can be connected to those people, again, because we have reached out and we do have the likes of Tino Porau and that type of amazing capability in that within region, but it is stretched and far in between. And at the moment, those partners who are lucky enough to secure early the contribution of Pukenga like that, brilliant. But from I guess a wider sort of broader TRMP perspective, and I even know Tina and Beth were considering how might we try and collectivise a bit of an approach to, and again, I think that idea is brilliant, but really just wanted to say if you know any more amazing Pukenga like that, please, we'll be happy to kia hono atu.
I think this is really important. I think this is where potentially governance and operations not blur the line, there's no blurring of lines, but might be able to support, because we have powers to call their people home in ways that other people cannot do it. It's true. If you are summoned by your iwi to leave whatever job you're doing and come home and do this job because this is what the people require, trust me, some of us are sitting in these tables because of this exact reason. That this is, it can be done. It can be done. I don't know where they are, but leaders, iwi leaders in particular, have an ability to look out across the country and the world and tell their people to get home and do this work. So I am happy to have a offline conversation with you and see who we need to talk to.
Okay.
I'll move it.
Thank you for moving. Seconded by Councillor Parata. No. Councillor Cranston, you need one big red flag that you just fly at me like this. The floor is yours and then we come your way.
Call me a red.
It is all yours. You are not a red flag. You need a red flag.
I'm not on this committee, so I just actually come along as an observer, but I do want an answer to a question because I've been putting the question for a while now and it relates to subdivision out at Wainui. And the question that I want answered is, what is the authority of the TRMP? I have written a paper on it, and unfortunately this would have been the appropriate committee to take it to, and I don't want to litigate that paper or the issues in it. But the reason I'm asking the question, what is the authority of the TRMP, is the subdivision questions I'm getting out in the Wainui community are very broad. So I've been donkey deep in the existing TRMP, seeing the rules as they're written, and then seeing just how many different rules are broken. So what is the authority of the TRMP? Because the answers I've got is that those rules are broken because of staff discretion and case-by-case analysis. So I want to know the guidelines of what a rule clearly states, and then it's usurped by staff discretion or case-by-case analysis. And I think that the detail of that I will take into a conversation with the paper I've written, but just if I get clarity about the authority of the TRMP for endorsing a rule.
Through you, Your Worship, so under the Resource Management Act, there are what are called different activity classes, and they range from permitted, so an activity is permitted provided you meet the standards and conditions written in the plan. You can go away and do that activity, and provided you've got landowner approval and all that sort of business, so that's permitted activity. And then the scope of activity class goes all the way through to prohibited, which means no matter what you do or say, you cannot do an activity. In between, you have a suite of different activity classes, and to do that activity legally, you require a resource consent. So that's when those points you're making around discretion and breaking the rules come into play. So they're not actually breaking a rule. What people are doing is applying for a resource consent to undertake an activity that they can't do as a permitted activity. They need to go through a consenting process, and depending on how the rule is written will depend what you can and can't take into account through that consenting process. So some activities are what are called controlled activities. That means we have to grant them, we can't decline the consent, and we only have control over a limited list of matters which are listed in the plan itself, and that's what the consent planner will take into consideration when they're setting conditions on the activity, like say a subdivision. Then you'll move up the chain, and as you go up the chain, there are more and more things you can take into account, and as a consent planner you can turn your mind to, and you have more discretion. But if the person who wants to do something, for example a subdivision, can prove that they're managing all the effects appropriately, so effects are more than minor or minor, and they've got appropriate conditions in place, the consent more often than not will get granted. So it's not that they're breaking a rule as such, they are applying for a resource consent because they know they can't meet the permitted activity, but they're demonstrating how they're managing the effects. And there may be limitations within the existing TRMP about what that consent planner can and can't take into account and turn their mind to and have discretion over. That's why it's so important that you get the rules right in the first place. When you're dealing with a dated plan or a plan that doesn't reflect current community aspirations and values, you get a real mismatch of what the community wants versus what the consent planner can actually do.
That'll be a robust discussion because that makes nonsense of the TRMP for me.
Well, there's RM reform underway, so it could all look different in the future.
But thank you for that. Any other questions or queries before we wrap it up? Nothing? Oh, Councillor Foster.
Yeah, I've just got one. It's putting an old hat on actually. Under the National Coastal Policy Statement, we've got 5 surf breaks here of national significance, and so we have to give effect to that in our TRMP, and so that gives them protection from, not environmental protection, but man-made protection, I guess. But we have more than any other region actually. So, and if we wanted to, well, how are they identified for a start? Because I've asked. I've I've asked this question a few times and no one can tell me how they get to be identified as surf breaks of national significance, whether it's done from a local source or if it's done,
Oh, this is why. So through you, Your Worship, when those surf breaks of significance went into the New Zealand Coastal Policy Statement, that work was done nationally. I believe that Gisborne, alongside Bay of Plenty, did have some additional research done, led by, I think it was a PhD student at the time, looking at what the surf breaks of regional significance were, alongside the surf breaks of national significance. So Bay of Plenty has reviewed and updated its coastal plan since that national direction came into place and has now included surf breaks of regional significance in its plan as well. We as a region haven't yet got into updating the coastal parts of our plan. That's all in phase 2 of the review, but that's when you can turn your mind to, do we need to identify more surf breaks, and what realistically are the protections that we need in place to protect those surf breaks. So in other regions, for example, in Whangamata, dredging activities can impact the surf break.
Okay, because so when that comes up, we will be consulting with our local boardwalkers club or some people, or our job will be to consult with them because we've got surf breaks all up the coast. Not all the surf breaks of national significance are here in the city area, and we've got ones up the coast that are regionally important and could even be nationally important. Yeah, so it would be good to be able to identify.
And there is a National Surf Break Protection Society. I don't know if they're still active, because I'm not active in coastal planning at the moment, but yes, that's a type of group we also interact with.
Yeah, okay, cool. Thank you.
Everyone happy? I wanted to say everyone happy is Larry.
I wish.
So do we have a mover for our last? Thank you, Councillor Foster. Seconded by, I think, Councillor... I'll second it. All in favour? And contrary carry. So we're going to have lunch in 10 minutes' time, but then I see we've got this workshop. My only concern is, does our colleagues know, because this is for all councillors,
I don't think they...